Good morning. Sorry, I'm not going to be able to match that cuteness that you guys just witnessed, whether on the video or in person. But weren't the kids just amazing? And man, they had so much fun this week. And I know some of you were watching this video, you were like, man, I missed it. I want to go down a water slide and put a bubble beard on and do all those crafts. And maybe next year you can volunteer. But it was an incredible week, and we were trying to think of how we could get you guys into the action. And so we're just going to invite a few of you up on stage to do the dance that you saw. And so if you look under your chairs, there's a red ribbon. And I'm just kidding. Some of you are like, this is my worst nightmare. I will never come back here ever again. But it was a phenomenal week, and also just so proud of these kids for not only like having a great experience, but learning the power of investing in people that they may never meet and making their lives better halfway around the world, and just did an incredible job. So can we give a huge hand to our kids team who just went all out this last week? So proud of them and everything they invested. Life-changing. The other thing I wanted to mention is that today, after this service, we are doing something we do every other month called Discover. And so maybe you've been coming here for a while and you're like, I kind of like this church, but I don't really know how to get involved. Like, how do you make friends? How do you meet people? Also, I have questions like, why do you do things this way? What do you believe about that? Discover is the place where you learn all of those things. And so it's a time for you to connect with me and our staff here at the Corona campus and pick our brains, meet some new friends, learn about our vision, our values, and how you can be more involved when you are ready to take your next step. And so to sweeten the deal, one of the things that to spice the deal is probably more accurately, we have free street tacos that we are serving for lunch if you are a part of the class. And so for some of you, maybe you've already done the class, but you're like, we're doing it again for those tacos because if you saw them out there cooking and you got a whiff of it, it is incredible. And so that's happening right afterwards. I'm going to be there. Would love to hang with you if that's something you'd like to do. But with that said, we are going to dive into the third week of this series that we started at the beginning of the month called Life Hacks, where we're talking about just practical ways to live out our faith. I think a lot of times when we think about faith, it's sort of this thing that like we believe and we hope we get to go to heaven, but like what does that have to do with the way we live life in the here and now? And there was this pastor in the New Testament. His name was James. He was actually the brother of Jesus, and he wrote one of the most practical books in the entire Bible, just about how to live out your faith in very practical ways. And we looked at these things and just thought, man, these are life hacks that could make each of our lives better. And so we just decided to review them one at a time. And so I just want to encourage you to take some notes today, write down some things that stand out or that you maybe want to think more about or talk about, have a discussion about, and figure out how to apply it to your life today. And if you are taking notes, the title of my message is, No One Wants You Here. No one wants you here. I remember back when I was in junior high, this may come as a surprise to some of you, but I was not always as cool and handsome and smooth as I am now. And in junior high, I was going through an awkward phase that only lasted about the first 40 years of my life. And so I was right at the middle of that, and I was having trouble making friends. We had just moved, and I met this kid at church, and he seemed really cool, and we were kind of like goofing off at Sunday school together, and I was like, oh man, this kid could be a friend of mine. And afterwards, he invited me to his birthday party, which was going to be a skate party. And I don't know how many of you grew up in the 80s, but there was none better than the skate party, right? This was just everything. And I was so excited. This is the first time I'd ever been invited to a skate party. I mean, sure, I'd been to an open skate before, but it's not the same as when you rent out the party room and you get to go crazy and they do limbo and all that. You guys remember how it went down, okay? And I was so excited, and so I planned for it all week long. I prepped what my outfit was gonna be. I practiced some dance moves, that I was gonna roll out when I got out there. And I showed up. I got my skates. I saw this kid from across the room. They're in that little place with the carpeted benches where you put on the skates. And so I walked up and I got up there, and he looked up, and the look of surprise and discomfort on his face, he had this look on his face that was just like, "What are you doing here?" And I knew he was thinking that because he said, "What are you doing here?" And I was like, all of a sudden, you invited me. And he was like, "I didn't think you were going to come. I only invited you because my mom told me to." And just immediately my heart sunk. And I was just like, "Oh no." And just I wanted to disappear. After that, they all got up and skated off. And I would love to be able to tell you that one of them tripped or that it was dumb, but they actually looked really cool. And they skated away from me, and I basically spent the whole rest of the evening just hanging out with his mom, which was apparently the only person that did want me there. And as it turned out, we actually had a lot in common. We were both tender souls with a love of yacht rock and Matlock, and we had a beautiful evening together, and we still keep in contact on Facebook. Shout out Cynthia. But at the time, it was disappointing. At the time, I didn't want to fit in with her. I wanted to fit in with these kids. And the rejection, man, it just sunk in deep. And I couldn't help but feel like it was so deeply personal, that there was something wrong with me. And maybe some of you are trying to let them off the hook, and you're like, maybe you just didn't give off like a good skating rink vibe. And that's fair. I probably didn't, right? And it is true that there are certain environments that maybe we fit in better than other environments. Every environment has its own set of unspoken rules that govern sort of how it works, right? You go someplace and there's sort of this vibe of this is what happens here, and these are the sort of people that hang out here, and this is what they're like and what they're into. And if you're not like that, you may not fit in. It may be tough for you, and that's fair, right? Because there are certain environments that are going to be tough for you to fit into. Maybe you shouldn't even fit in there, right? If you don't have kids, why are you hanging out on the edge of a playground? That is weird. Just you watching, breathing heavily. We don't want you there. It's uncomfortable. I don't need to know the reasons. If you have a deadly grass allergy, maybe don't start, a landscaping company. Probably a bad move. You're not going to fit in to that field, right? If you are a militant vegan, right? Don't work as a chef at the Fat Stack Rib Shack, okay? That is a weird job for you to have, and then blaming everybody else for the fact that you don't fit in. These are not personal issues. These are environmental realities. But there is a big difference, and if you've experienced this, you already know this. There's a big difference between I feel out of place here and I am clearly not wanted here. Those are two different categories. And I would tell you, it really does hurt when you realize that certain people don't like you. I think it hurts even worse when you understand that they're convinced that being around you will cause other people not to like them. In other words, that's part of the reason why they don't want to be associated with you. They don't want to be seen with you because they're afraid that you're going to somehow ruin their reputation, that you're going to decrease their value, that you're going to damage their image if people put the two of you together. And I think this is really why this kid did not want me at his skate party. He was like, "Man, you are lowering my stock in junior high. Just being seen with you, just having other people know that you're at the party. Not only don't I really like you, but I know other people don't like you, and it's going to look bad on me to be with you." And the question I want to ask you this morning, and it's not a fun one, is if you're honest with yourself, where aren't you wanted? And by whom? Maybe it's been a while since you've thought about this. Maybe you can get the answer real quick. Maybe you've spent time really blocking it out in your life. And maybe part of what is confusing about the relationship you have with this particular person is that, the way they treat you isn't really consistent. That was definitely the case with this kid. He was one way at church and another way at the skating rink. And maybe you have relationships like that too, where the rejection you experience is very up and down, and it makes it way more complicated. Like they'll text you privately, but they won't hang out with you publicly. They'll invite you to come hang out with their family, but they would never bring you to a work party. They're really cool with like a late night hookup, but they don't want to be in a real relationship. And it brings this level of confusion where the rejection is conditional based on who's around and how they're feeling, but it's damaging. And I think it's easy for us to acknowledge, man, not everybody is going to like you, but what happens when you feel like nobody likes you? Like you are a permanent outsider. Now, maybe this is true. Maybe nobody does like you, or maybe it just feels that way. Because the truth is, when you have a long history of rejection, you start to see everything as rejection. You start to read rejection into situations where it doesn't even exist. And after a while, everything uncomfortable feels like it's your fault, even when you're not a factor. And you find yourself assuming that almost everybody could turn on you at any minute. They didn't reply to my text. They clearly hate me. And it's like, well, actually, their phone was on silent and they were in a meeting, so it's not what you think. Sure, they waved at me, but did you see their smile? It was kind of fake, okay? They're a fake person, and that wave was a little too aggressive. It's like, maybe they're just genuinely excited to see you. No, they're not. No one is. You know, they didn't say hi when they saw me across the way, so I guess I did something horrible to them that they don't want to be associated with me. And it's like, no, it's nothing like that. Their dog died, okay? Not everything is about you. But it feels like it is when so many things seem to have been. Now, if you do this, if you have this sort of knee-jerk reaction when something uncomfortable happens, you don't like that you're like this. You've just experienced so much rejection that, you know, bracing for the worst feels safer than just sort of blindly moving forward with your life and getting hurt at every turn. And so to avoid being rejected, you start doing the rejecting. And I think there are all sorts of reasons we end up rejecting people, and we don't even consciously realize that we're doing this for these reasons. But I think the most common reason is you end up rejecting them before they can reject you. It's going to happen anyway. I'm going to go first. Or you reject them because they remind you of someone who rejected you. Oh, I know your kind. Oh, yeah. Yeah, tall blonde men are all evil. Maybe you reject them because they reflect back to you something you don't like about you. Or maybe you reject them because they struggle to do something that's easy for you. Like, I can do it. Why can't you do it? There's something wrong with you. And you push them away. And over time, after doing this over and over and over again, you evolve into this walled-off, judgmental person. And like in this attempt to avoid being further wounded in your life, you become like the person who wounded you. And you perpetuate the cycle of rejection, just with different people. And I think a lot of us have found ourselves in this place. And this is actually how people become biased or prejudice, unintentionally, right? They become this way due to fear, due to past pain, due to self-protection. Now, that doesn't make it okay, but that is why it happens. And we hate it when people do it to us. Don't you hate it when people size you up and think they know you because they know one or two things about you? And then they decide that they have the ability now to judge the entirety of who you are. They're like, I know your kind. All people who like country music are dumb hicks. Except for that one Beyonce album. That one gets a pass. You're like, what? Anybody who voted for that person obviously has no moral conscience whatsoever. There's something about people who ride motorcycles. I don't know what it is, but I don't like it. I don't trust it. All girls with nose rings are shallow and into crystals. And a lot of their names are Crystal, which is weird too. Now, one of these things is actually true, but I'm not going to tell you which one it was. No, I'm just kidding. But we do this, right? We jump to these conclusions about people. We size them up. We think we know who they are because we know one or two things about something that they do. And we hate this. We hate it when people apply blanket statements to us, and yet we do it to others all the time. We even find ourselves doing it when we don't want to do it, when we know it's wrong, when we know better. There's this recent article that came out in Newsweek about this research study that was done in which hiring managers across the United States were interviewed and asked a bunch of questions. And some of the results they found were just scathing. They discovered this. 57% of hiring managers said attractive candidates are more likely to get the job even if they're unqualified. By the way, these are the people making the hires that said this. 68% admitted that an employee's looks absolutely affect their manager's opinion of their performance, even if it has nothing to do with their performance. 59% suggested that you spend as much time and money on looking attractive as you did on building skills for a resume. Like when you hear that, if you're like me, you're like, gross, right? And yet, not surprised. Like, I mean, and you get it, right? Like you love pretty people too, but you would never do anything like this. You're like, I'm better than those people. But maybe you already have, because sometimes we find ourselves evaluating people in ways that we don't want to admit we do because we don't even realize we're doing it. It flies under the radar of our consciousness. I think it is embarrassing to admit how easy it is to size people up based on shallow criteria. And we're not the only ones to do this. And in fact, this is not just a modern problem, this is a human problem. So much so that so many early Christians struggled with this, that one of the first pastors actually felt the need to write them about it. This is what James, the brother of Jesus, wrote. James chapter 2, verse 2, he says, "Suppose someone comes into your church meeting dressed in fancy clothes and expensive jewelry, and another comes who's poor and dressed in dirty clothes. If you give special attention and a good seat to the rich person, but say to the poor one, stand over there, or sit on the floor, doesn't this discrimination show your judgments are guided by evil motives?" The word evil is interesting to me. Not just like bad idea, not like maybe steer away from, not great, like this is evil. And his example is sort of treating people who are wealthier better than people who are poorer. But this is just one example, because we favor people for all different sorts of reasons, right? Because, they're more stylish, because they have a better job. They live in a better neighborhood. They have education from a more prestigious school. They have a higher number of followers or a higher number of tattoos, whatever your thing is, right, that you're interested in. And this is not how James wants Jesus' followers to evaluate people. And he gives them a reason as to why they shouldn't do it. He quotes Jesus and then gives his commentary on it. He says this in verse 8 of James chapter 2, "Obey the royal law, love your neighbor as yourself. If you favor some people over others, that's sin." Have you ever thought about that before? That favoritism is sin? He says it's breaking the royal law. Royal law meaning like the one ring that rules them all, right? The law that like trumps all of the other rules. He's saying like, listen, if you had to sort of summarize the teachings of Jesus in a single idea, it would be this: to love other people the way Jesus loves you. Looking down on other people is a sin, which is how you know we're all sinners, because you have Facebook, right? That's basically just people looking down on and shaming other people. That's basically all it's for. That and allowing your grandma to see what your kids look like now. Where did James get this idea, though? He gets it from Jesus, right? And not just from the way Jesus taught, but from the way Jesus treated people, and also the way that Jesus stood up for people who were being mistreated by others around him. And there's so many examples of this, but I want to just look at one this morning. This is found in the book of Luke, chapter 7, verse 36. It says this, that Simon the Pharisee asked Jesus to have dinner with him. And so Jesus went to his home and sat down to eat. Now, here just contextually is what you need to know. Like, ancient people didn't eat around dining room tables the way we do now. They sat on mats and cushions on the floor, in usually the main room of a house. There were these communal trays and platters that were sort of arranged around them. Oftentimes, people were reclining, and they would tear pieces of meat and bread off these communal platters and dip them into these bowls and eat, and then double dip again. It's not COVID friendly, is what I'm saying. Okay, there's a lot of swapping spit with these other people. It was a very intimate act, like having dinner with other people, which is why in this culture, you really only ate with people that you wanted to be close to. And who you sat with and next to at these dinners was a really big deal, because meals were where the scriptures were discussed and deals were made. It was the place where life was really determined and decided. If you had like a politician or a philosopher or a rabbi over, you would seat them sort of in the center at the seat of honor, and everybody would gather around, and that person would teach and talk and tell stories and answer questions, and you wanted to get as close to them as you could, because if you were right next to and getting approval from the smartest person in the room, then it made you look good just by association. In fact, this right here is a picture of really what most church services likely would have looked like in the first century. Like when James is saying, when people come into your meeting, he's talking about this sort of environment. Because church back in this time period didn't look like it does today. It wasn't like people in a big building in rows of chairs facing a stage. It was a bunch of people sitting on mats and cushions around food and listening to a teacher and having conversations about real life. So Jesus is at this dinner with this very religious man, a Pharisee. It says in verse 37, when a certain immoral woman heard he was there, she brought a jar filled with expensive perfume, and she knelt weeping at his feet, drying them with her hair, kissing his feet, and putting perfume on them. I love that it says that she heard that he was there, and then she showed up, a.k.a. she was not invited, right? She was stalking, right? She heard where he was going to be, and she was just like, I'm just going to roll through. And, there was a reason that she wasn't invited, right? It was because she was an immoral woman. We already heard this described. Now, in this culture that we're being told about here, good religious people didn't hang out with people like this. People of low moral character. You didn't want to be seen around them or associated with them. It wasn't just that this one guy didn't want her there. Nobody wanted her there. And yet she comes in and makes it weird anyway. And it was typical when you went to someone's house, because you were walking around in sandals or bare feet, to wash your feet before you came into someone's house. So that is normal. But having a prostitute do this for you with perfume in the middle of dinner, while crying uncontrollably and using her hair as a towel while kissing your toe knuckles, not normal, okay? Some of you are like, oh, maybe there's some like cultural disconnect. No, there's just some weird lady disconnect, okay? This would have been crazy to the people that were there at the time. Like, okay, this is abnormal. Like, this is making a scene. What do we do about this situation? It says this in verse 39, when Simon saw this, he thought, if Jesus were a true prophet, he would know what kind of woman was touching him. An immoral one. Now, this guy is sort of framed as the villain of this story, and I think there's good reason for that. But you have to admit, he's not wrong, because everybody knew who she was. Everybody knew what she did. Nobody wanted her there. They didn't like her, and they were convinced that being associated with her would make people not like them. They didn't want her at the party. They didn't want her at the dinner or in the room, and they are not wrong. This is how things worked in this society. This is why Pharisees usually only ate dinners like this with people who observed their strict rules. But Jesus was different. He invited all kinds of immoral people to sit at his table. It was his way of clearly communicating to them, listen, I care about you. I want a relationship with you. You are welcome in my family. I'm not embarrassed to be seen with or to be connected to you. And outside of this room, I will look out for you and I will stand up for you. And I think Jesus had already made this clear to this woman. I don't know if they had some sort of interaction or if she'd heard him teach before or if they'd had a conversation outside of this place, but she had this clear understanding that he saw her this way, which would have been the only reason for her to show up on this particular day. Because to him, she realized that she was not an object to be used or a point to be made. She was a person to be loved. In fact, this may have been the only man in her life up to this point who did not use her. The only religious person who didn't point to her as an illustration. Jesus was different. And I want you to know that no matter what your background is, no matter what you've done, where you've come from, what's happened to you, that when Jesus looks at you, he does not see an object to use or a point to make. He sees a person to love. He sees somebody that he created, that he is passionately in love with, who he wants the best for, who he wants to help see as he sees them. And then Jesus launches into this mini parable. He tells this little story. And the whole purpose of it is to try and get Simon to empathize with this woman. He's basically saying, like, listen, you have lots of opinions about her, but you've never once sort of thought about what it feels like to be her, to have gone through the things that she's gone through in life, to have been forced to do the things that she's had to do just to sort of survive. And what you're doing right now, the way you're talking to and treating her, this is not helpful. You are actually further hurting her because you are a shallow judge. Another New Testament author turns this experience into a piece of advice. He says this in the book of Philippians chapter 2, verse 3. Don't be selfish. Don't try and impress others. Be humble, thinking of others as better than yourselves. Don't look out only for the interest of others, but take an interest in others too. And when you read this, you do the same thing I do where you're like, that sounds like the opposite of Simon the Pharisee in this story. He was selfish. He was obsessed with being impressive. He was condescending and judgmental. He was interested in himself and not really in the people around him and what they were going through and what they thought. He represented everything that James told the Jesus followers of his day not to be. Then in this story, in Luke, in verse 44, it says, Then Jesus said to Simon, look at this woman. When I entered your home, you didn't offer me water to wash my feet, but she washed them with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You didn't greet me with a kiss, which was traditional, and she hasn't stopped kissing my feet. You didn't give me olive oil to anoint my head, as is the custom, but she anointed my feet with rare perfume. And Jesus is saying, listen, here's the difference between us. When you look at her, all you see is a prostitute. But when I look at her, I can't help but see her humility, her generosity, and her sincerity. And what it shows me is that you don't really know her. In fact, Simon, I think you're rejecting her because you're afraid to be rejected. I think you're attempting to pull yourself up by pushing her down. I think they're part of the reason that you are pointing out her sin is to avoid having to acknowledge and address your own sin. But you are right about one thing. You and her, you're very different. Because she is humble and generous and sincere, but you are prideful, manipulative, and fake. How uncomfortable would it be to be called out by Jesus over dinner? It says, Then Jesus said to the woman, Your sins are forgiven. Your faith has saved you. Go in peace. And I think it's interesting that Jesus offers her forgiveness. In fact, he grants her forgiveness. But there's nowhere in this story where she asks for forgiveness. But Jesus can tell by her actions that she is desperate to be seen and known and forgiven. By the way, this term that we throw around in Christian circles, salvation, people talk about getting saved. It's an ancient military term that means to be freed from oppression. And Jesus is literally saying to her, the decision that you have made to believe what I say about you, that what I say is actually true, despite what you hear from anybody else, that is the thing that has saved you, that has set you free. Because the sort of oppression that she is experiencing is walking around with the weight of rejection from relationship after relationship after relationship, from situation after situation, from environment to environment. That it begins to reshape who she sees herself and who she thinks she is. And Jesus is saying the true salvation, your freedom from the oppression of what other people think of you who don't actually know you and are judging you superficially, is to tune into my voice and hear what I say and to believe what I see in you. And this is why she could walk away in peace, because true peace is believing what God says above what other people say and then acting on it. And this is clearly what she's doing in this story. And the point that Jesus is making is the exact same point that James is making, that you are defined by who you serve, not by who you're seen with. And our culture sees it the other way. You want to be seen with the right people. And Jesus is like, no, what makes somebody incredible is when they are serving the right people. And these are the people that everybody else has pushed aside, that everybody else has rejected, that everybody else has determined they don't want to be associated with. And part of me wonders if Jesus was thinking about this story and these two people when he said this in Matthew chapter 23, verse 11. The greatest among you must be a servant, but those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. And this is why Jesus elevates the immoral woman and he exposes Simon. And I think every room you ever walk in is populated by both people. The question is, which one are you? I think when we read stories like this, or even when we carry ourselves through our own life, we like to assume that we're the hero of the story. But if your interactions with other people aren't marked by humility, generosity, and sincerity, you're the villain. And I think sometimes we are the villain of the story and we don't realize it because we look more like Simon than we do this woman. But the good news for all of us Simons, myself included, is this, that we can change our story by surrendering to Jesus. By letting go of our pride, by admitting that some of the reason why we reject other people, why we are judgmental and opinionated and feel the need to push certain people away is because we are so afraid of it happening to us. It's when we surrender to Jesus and allow him to save us from our sin and from ourselves, just like this woman in the story does, we experience true freedom. And once you have tasted the ability to see yourself through God's eyes accurately, you want to give that out to everybody you come in contact with. So here's your homework this week. The challenge I want to give you to take away is to this week go out of your way to treat someone who's often overlooked like a VIP. Maybe it's somebody at work, maybe it's somebody in your neighborhood, maybe it's somebody in your own family, maybe it's somebody here at church, somebody who others, they don't include, they don't reach out to, they don't encourage or compliment, they don't bring along, they don't gift experiences to, somebody who's sort of always being pushed to the side or to the background, somebody who's being ignored or rejected or overlooked. What would it look like for you to, like Jesus, say, I got a seat right here next to me. I'm not embarrassed to be seen with you. I see something unique and special in you. I think God has a plan for you. He cares about you, and I do too. I think you not just saying that, but demonstrating that in action to someone has the ability to transform their entire story, just like it did for this woman. And I guarantee you that it won't just impact them, it impacts everybody watching you. Treat them differently. What if we began to change the way that the people who are generally pushed aside are treated? And when people ask questions like, how come you treat them differently? We can say, because I believe in treating people how Jesus treats me. This is how I see Jesus. That has the ability to change the world. And I want to pray that God would give you the ability and the courage to live that out, because it's already what God has done for you. Would you bow your heads across this room today? I just want to pray this into your life. God, we are so grateful for the way you love us, for the way that you see us. God, so many of us in this room, man, we have been through so much. We've experienced so much hurt, pain, loss, rejection. We know what it feels like to get our hopes up and then to realize that we were not wanted in a certain environment, in a certain relationship, in a certain place with a certain group of people. Maybe some of us have racked up so many of these experiences that we have just become convinced that it is us. There is something so damaged and broken about us that we are unlovable, unacceptable. And yet, God, when you look at us, you can see through all of the things that other people see on the surface, and you see through to our soul. You see somebody who you made in your image, who probably has made a lot of mistakes and done a lot of things simply to survive. And you love us. You care for us. You pull us close. You treat us with love and grace. You bring us into your family, and you bless us beyond anything we could ever deserve. And God, I pray that we would have the ability to embrace how you see us, to see ourselves the same way, and that you would begin to empower us to see the people around us, especially those others have written off, to see them through your eyes, to love them, to care for them, to invite them to the table. And God, I pray that we would be those who change the way people see themselves, because we remind them of how Jesus sees them. It's in your name we pray. And everybody said, amen.